most merciful, the most compassionate. This is your presenter today, Dr. Mamdouh Nuruddin Muhammad. And before we get into the topic, I'd love to greet you with the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace be unto all of you. I remind you that the name of this series is Two Options, and it talks about the choices or the options that we have in our life that we confront almost on daily basis or an hourly basis even, or even less than this and sometimes. And the degree of difficulties of these tests that we confront varies from one situation into another. And we Muslims know that it's the people who get the toughest tests are the messengers of Allah, then the people with strong belief. And the wisdom behind it and the rationale behind this is that if you pass a test, which is difficult, you are elevated to another level, and you are elevated to another level and to higher level. And this is how the people are in different grades in paradise, depending on the successes that they have made in this life. So it's an integral part of our life. We cannot live without it. It will come to us in different forms, and we have to understand the context of these, and we have to believe in the Quran that says that it's part of this life. And you have to understand that every human being, Muslim or non-Muslim alike, he or she goes through these tests. So it's coming, it's with us, we live them, we have them everywhere in the world. So we have to bear up with this and to live our life with these tests. And we have to remember that we are rewarded by Almighty Allah if we pass them successfully. We talked about many examples focusing on the messengers of Allah. And the reason that we focus on the messengers of Allah, we give you plenty of tough tests. So if you get easier tests, thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason is that those messengers are from different places in the world. And we tell you that all of them are messengers from Allah, and they are the best human beings. And if the best is tested, so we are going to be tested. Today, another example is about Musa alayhi salam, when he was in a situation to select. Like it's a little bit similar to the test that Ibrahim alayhi salam has gone through when he was commanded by Almighty Allah. And here the conflict is between, it's not just accepting the command of Allah, but here the pressure on him was different one. He was commanded by Almighty Allah to use his stick, his long stick. You know that he was in a situation when he took the believers of the Jews and he was trying to leave Egypt and to cross the Red Sea, when the Pharaoh and his very advanced army were chasing him, and they came close to him and they were threatening him. So there was real panic and fear among the believers led by Moses alayhi salam. And the believers were so scared, and they tried to spell it out. Yes, they are catching us. The army is catching us. Is about to catch us. They're going to destroy us. And he was so sure and so confident that Almighty Allah will give him away. He always used to respond to them, Kalla inna ma'ya rabbi sayahdeen. Nay, they will not destroy us. I am quite sure. I am quite confident that Almighty Allah will find a way for me. He never asked about the way, but he had full confidence in his heart, because he is an example, a model, a role model for all Muslims, that we don't question Allah. We don't ask is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to help you or to give you support. Just leave it in the hands of Allah. Do your part. Then the command came to him. فأوحينا إلى موسى أن اضرب بعصاك الحجر. Excuse me. Here's the other verse. Here's فأوحينا إلى موسى, to throw, not al-hajar here, al-bahr. the Red Sea, reference to the Red Sea. So the verse reads, فَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى أَنِ اضْرِبْ بِعَصَاكَ الْبَحْرَ. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that we inspired Musa to use the stick and to throw it, the sea with it. And then it happened. We found that a way that was paved between the two huge mountains of waves, one on the right, one on the left. There is a paved way in between them because of the effect of the stick. The situation here was, how could Musa alayhi salam would perceive that a stick would do such an amazing and unbelievable thing? How could it happen? Anyone who doesn't have the belief, who does not trust Allah, would definitely find this situation impossible to perceive, because we have not ever seen that a use of a stick would change a sea into a paved piece of land. It's almost next to impossible. If you use your mind or your logic or your education or your personal experience or the collective experience of humanity, it never happened before. And for a believer knows that even if it doesn't happen before or it didn't happen before, it doesn't mean that it's impossible to happen, because we know that there's nothing called impossible from the perspective of Almighty Allah. We knew that everything is possible from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah can do anything at no time with no effort, just by spelling a word like be, kun, and it happens. And here is the difficult situation. People nowadays sometimes would raise these questions. How would you imagine that the day of judgment will happen and the whole earthquake would cover the whole world until it becomes leveled? It didn't happen before. It happened on a small scale. Yes, we know that. It happened in a small scale. We've seen earthquakes, we've seen volcanoes, we've seen tsunamis are happening. And by the way, these late tsunamis that happen more frequently than before is a sign of the day of judgment. And it is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show the people nowadays that these are examples of what is going to happen on the day of judgment. It's just a very simple example of what's going to happen, the scary situation that will happen on the day of judgment. And it's up to you to believe or not. Perhaps the people nowadays, or the people who are faced with these calamities that's happening in their lands and their countries, perhaps they are in a better situation than people who have never heard about these, because they see by their own eyes the impact of just a small tsunami that affects them, or a small earthquake that affects a whole city or a whole country. So if it is happening now we can see that. If it happens on a small scale, why shouldn't it happen on a large scale? We Muslims know that it happens because of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He has a wisdom behind this. And we have to understand that it happened in front of the eyes of the prophets of Allah. And here's the example that I'm focusing today. The two options that were confronting Musa alayhi salam, either to believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is option number one, either to trust Allah and to believe that if He threw the stick, it will affect the sea and it will change it and will make a paved way in front of him to save him and his army. Or not to believe this and not to trust Allah because of the experience of humanity. It never witnessed, it never saw that a stick would make this impact. Either to trust this, how the people think, to trust your own intellect, or to trust Almighty Allah. And that's why all the time Muslims believe that, of course, the faith and the trust of Allah is above science, is above humanity, is above the collective experience of human beings, is above research, is above everything, because Allah is the one who can give a command to anything and it happens. When we develop this faith in our hearts, we find things are very easier. So they are in our background here. We know them. We know these stories. And that's why it's very important to teach them to our kids so they would be on the track, on the right track. We recall all these stories. So whenever a situation rises, we find some similarity to it in the history of the messengers of Allah, peace be upon all of them. My dear viewers everywhere, I hope you take this and you apply it in your life and try to come up with some examples that happened in your life that would make the story, would make the distance between these stories of them that happened to the Messenger of Allah and the personal story that you've gone through to make the distance very close. And in this way, yes, you will find that it's easier to confront these tests, inshallah, by the support of Allah. And that's why we all the time say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. And this is your presenter, Mamdouh Nuruddin Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
In this world today, there are many ways to fall from grace and to go astray. We should realize that in our lives we can make a change.